Welcome to Master Your Money, the podcast that teaches you how to take control of your hard-earned money, all while living your best life. I am your host, Elizabeth Heiza, Chief Marketing Officer at the Barnum Financial Group. I once felt powerless when it came to managing my finances, and my attitude follows suit. Until one day, I changed my mindset, built up my knowledge, and put myself back into a financial position of power. And I started this podcast to provide you with the same education and advice that I received on my journey. Now, I want to help you master your money. All right, welcome to Master Your Money. Today, we are here with my colleague, Dan Flynn. Dan is the Chief Revenue Officer here at Barnum Financial Group. And I've known Dan for a very long time throughout both of our careers for various projects that we had to work on together. But I've always known Dan and loved Dan and couldn't be more thrilled when he joined the firm. Dan and I were talking one day in my office, and Dan was just giving me so much perspective on his journey with financial advisors and how he's been with the same advisors, the same financial advisor and advisor team almost his whole life. And I said, you know what? This is just fabulous information that our Master Your Money listeners would just love. So today we're actually flipping the script a little bit, and we are going to talk from the client's perspective, Dan acting as our client, to tell us what the financial planning journey is like from their side. And I couldn't be more thrilled because it's not often that we get this type of perspective. So Dan, welcome. So thrilled to have you.
Yeah, so happy to be here. That's going to be fun.
It is going to be fun. And not to mention, you guys will hear this, but Dan is just an all-out great guy. When you talk about quality people, Dan is just one of them. Ton of amazing stories, so easy to be around, and really amazing what he does professionally.
Oh, thank you. That's so nice. I appreciate it. And likewise, it's been great being a partner of yours, but to now be working together at Barnum, it's just a dream come true.
It is. So Dan, let's start. Talk to us about yourself, your background, as a professional, but also as a client.
Yeah, sure. So I've been in the career, been in financial services over 30 years now, which is crazy. And number of different roles, different companies, primarily worked in larger organizations, kind of corporate financial services firms with a national footprint. But it's really always been working with financial advisors. I've just had this affinity and connection to advisors, and really, I think, have gotten to understand what makes them tick and really trying to help them at all times better serve their clients. And so it was interesting. If I just think about my career, came in really in the investment space. And so a lot of about numbers and, performance and kind of all of that stuff is how I grew up in the business. But then really having the ability to connect with advisors and understand and appreciate what they do really gave me just a way different view of what this is all about. And a lot of, individuals and family successes and businesses successes really are more about emotion, behavior. It's not about markets, but about life events, right? I mean, all of those things. And so again, as you said, I've had a pretty fun, sometimes tumultuous journey in my career, taking me to different companies in different states. And I've really just grown to appreciate having someone who knows me, knows my family, knows my goals, my values, who can, be a sounding board. So that's really been my journey. It's been always in this business, but, I really feel like I've been able to, not just sit as a, corporate person, but really sit in the client seat. And it's really helped me in my profession tremendously as well.
I would imagine. So tell us, when did you first start working with a financial advisor on your finances?
I was right about to get married. I was in this business, and the firm I was in, financial planning, and being more holistic with clients. I feel like just even overall, we've seen this in my time in the industry, kind of this evolution from we sell things to we help advise clients, right? I think it's really been from the time I came into the business. And so we were at a place where, financial planning was a key strategy, a focus. I was playing a role there. And so, again, getting ready to get married, it's like, you know what, this is a really good time for me to go through this, see it from a career perspective. It was going to help me with the work I was doing. And, but at the same time, I'm about to kind of embark on, marriage and family and everything else, becoming an adult, I guess, and thought it would make sense. So, I had an advisor that I worked closely with, that I had a lot of respect for,
Sure.
Felt a, trust and connection to, and who had, had a really strong team around him, and just jumped in. And so really started that process, and, went through and really, experienced going through and doing a plan with my wife as my partner through that, or my soon-to-be wife as my partner through that.
Sure. So without sharing too many details, what stage of your career were you in that point? Had you been working for a number of years?
Yeah, I was probably, midpoint of my career. I was a little bit, got married a little bit later in life. It was maybe like 10 years. And, so kind of not entry level, right? But kind of midpoint in my career. And so, I guess was making a little bit of money, but I wasn't like,
Sure.
rolling in dough by any stretch.
Sure. And so it sounds like the motivator was more this work, this professional project you were working on. And you said, hey, I can serve better if I go through the process myself.
Yeah, I have to. I wish I would say it was my, disciplined foresight.
That's okay.
But no, it was circumstances.
That's normal.
And it was. I said, let me, the best way to experience it and be able to add value was to, to go through it. And so, yeah, I kind of raised my hand and said, let me see what this is all about. As others were trying to figure out where it fit, I said, what better way to experience this than through a client seat, so that we can best, position ourselves to serve clients in the best way.
After you, volunteered to do that, was there any part of you that was like, oh, do I regret this? I'm only going to tell him half truths, right? I know this guy, we work together. Did any of that ever come up?
Yeah, it was daunting. No question. I mean, that was one of the biggest things I took away is, this is hard work, right? And again, it's way more than just kind of numbers and performance. If I'm really going to extract value as a client, it required me to do a couple of things that frankly were not fun or comfortable. One you were alluding to there, which is being vulnerable, right? I don't know that I was necessarily at that point in my life too proud of, my spending habits and how much I've saved. You know what I mean? It's like you start reflecting back, oh man, I should have put more money away.
Yes.
Maybe I shouldn't be spending this on this.
Yeah.
And even more so, I'm about to get married, and I don't know that, and my wife was actually in this business too. We never really talked about money and what it meant for the two of us, and so that whole piece about being vulnerable was really important. And then the second one that I remember was just daunting was, it's almost like just the self-reflection aspect, but the work behind that, like I didn't even what am I spending money on? Am I saving the right things? Like just doing a little bit of that, self-inventory, but from a financial perspective, I'll be honest, if I wasn't working with someone who held me accountable, I would not have gotten from point A to point B, right? In terms of really inventorying and having how do I know where I'm heading if I don't know where I am today? That's the way I would think about it. And that definitely took a little bit of work, and certainly took some counseling and accountability to do that.
Yes. Well, bravo for making your way through that. So what was the introduction to financial planning that your advisor gave you?
Yeah, it was, again, you come into anything in life with certain expectations or perceptions, and it was completely different. I just remember sitting in that conference room.
Different than what you like the story.
Yeah. I mean, I just, again, you just think of our business, right? A lot of it is just math and numbers and spreadsheets and things. And, the first meeting, it was just questions, and hey, what's important to you guys? And I was just like, this is really just, again, a little uncomfortable. The fact that there was, some trust there was important.
Could you answer the questions? Did you know the answer?
No, it was like one of those, you're sitting in the room with someone and you feel like you should know the answer, and you're trying to look at each other to compare notes as you try to answer.
As you're listening.
Yeah, is that right? Does that sound right? Are we still getting married?
Yes, it's almost a version of the dating game.
Yes, for sure. So yes, it was, as I said, we were not rehearsed. but that was the value, right?
Sure.
It was a safe space to talk through some of those things. And again, the person who facilitated was that expert who knew, what questions to ask and, how to take us down a good path to, and the term that I got to that, if nothing else, walking out of that experience, being aligned with my wife or future wife on money, what we want for our family, what we want for our futures, like that was tremendously valuable. Right. And then I don't know how or when that would have kind of,
Come up
we would have
organically.
gotten to that place. Right. And so to have that established, again, it's like having your destination, like, okay, we know where we want to go. Now everything can kind of, happen over time that helps us plot that course and frankly deal with the curveballs that life are going to throw at us.
Yep. But where you both agree on the destination.
100%. I mean, that's, thankfully, I guess, right? I walked out of there going, man, yeah, this is good. I'm marrying the right person, right? Like we're in good shape.
How long did you meet with the advisor before you got married?
Funny, I don't really remember the exact timeline, but it was right then. And by the way, this wasn't like one meeting and everything was solved, right? I mean, this was a process. So my guess is it probably all rolled into kind of pre getting married and then post getting married, and then on from there, having children, all those things, right?
Did you have, you mentioned you didn't expect kind of so many questions, so many qualitative questions, not money related questions. Did you expect your financial advisor to be so skilled in asking those questions and listening, knowing because you have worked with financial advisors for so long?
Yeah. I mean, I guess, I did know him, so I knew his demeanor, right? As a caring person and, someone who would show up in that way. But again, it was more of the experience itself that felt so different than what I expected and rich.
Yes.
Is what comes to mind.
Yes. And even though it was uncomfortable, right? There were moments that you were uncomfortable. I would imagine you still felt safe.
Tremendously safe.
Which is what you should feel.
No question. And I also felt like, again, even back to it being a process and a journey. And even to this day, I feel like it's a very healthy balance of, being gently pushed, but also, being in control of kind of the pace and where and when we head to places, right? That to me was, again, if I think back on it, it wasn't like you're failing, because you didn't get this to me by Tuesday, right? It was a caring, shepherded process that we went through.
And I would imagine free of judgment, like, well, Dan, you should be here. Or most people, around your age and around your income level are here.
So I think that is such a huge point without question. And I forget what I was watching or seeing. It's like people that are in those seats, they've seen it all, right?
Yes.
Whether it's doctors or lawyers or whatever. And I think whomever's on the other side of the table as the client, if you will, has all this, fear, anxiety around where they are versus others, right? Even way more so now with social media, right? Like you think everybody's got all of their act together, right? And it's not even close. Close. I think, again, that was back to that balance of recognizing there were things that were being done well, and there were other things that we could do to put us in a better position, right? And again, to this day, it's still a continued work in progress. And I think that's what really made it continuous, is that ability for it not to be judged or graded or even benchmarked against anybody else. It's more, how do we be the best version of ourselves and continue to make progress to where we want to go?
I love that. And even though you know all of this, right? You know this because you've been teaching financial advisors how to implement these strategies. But as a client, you know it, but you still feel it. You still can't help but internally benchmark yourself.
Yeah, no question. But it's, whatever it is, any, to put the growth mindset topic, right? Anything you're going to do is going to require you to be a little bit uncomfortable if you're going to grow and get better. And so I think this is that, same experience where it's the vulnerability, but then it's the vulnerability leading to good outcomes. And then repeat and then repeat and then repeat,
Yes.
right? That's been my experience in this and finding the right person. I think that's why maybe more people don't work with advisors, right? Is kind of that self-anxiety or concern about being judged and, misconception of what the objective, the process, right? Whatever that may be, to really go, yeah, everyone's in the same boat here, right? Nobody's, or this profession wouldn't exist if everybody could figure this out on their own.
Yes, we know that it's a very difficult road to go through alone. You mentioned, and you said it beautifully, that the advisor is a nice, gentle push. And you're still working with that same advisor today.
Correct.
So how many years later? So many years later.
17, 18.
Beautiful. So tell us about how emotions and procrastination can get in the way of this, of your long-term goals on this long-term journey, right? After 17 years, you have to be comfortable with this person. You have to trust him and the team, but still, do these things pop up for you?
Yeah, for sure. It's always, and I think those are the two things that, I think you hit the nail on the head, that two things that get in the way of success, whatever everyone's individual definition of that is. And so I think one example that's, an easy one when I think of procrastination of like, hey, you now have had children, you need to get, wills and trusts and, all those things, right? That as new parents, you're just not looking to even contemplate. Mm-hmm. And so, part of, I think, the skill in the advisor is also creating a sense of urgency when it's warranted.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so, it's easy to put those things off that we don't want to address. And as always, life gets in the way. So to me, that procrastination component, there's, certainly an emotional element of avoidance of some tough subjects. But again, I think it's back to that having an ongoing relationship and even just check-ins, like, how are things going? Like, oh man, I know I got to get to that. Right. And it just, like anything else in life, if you got someone who can be a caring accountability partner, that's value, not negative.
Yes. And realizing that you are in a relationship with your advisor and your advisor team. So each of you has responsibilities, mutual responsibilities, and they can only help you if you help yourself.
Yeah. And I think, like with any other valuable relationship or partnership, the open and transparent communication is crucial, right? I mean, along that path, I think, there's times where both of us had to, maybe have some open discussions. Nothing specific comes to mind, but I remember that where it's like, oh, hey, I didn't like how this went, or him saying, hey, you got to do more, whatever it may be, right? I think that's where, again, there's this with clients and advisors, or this maybe intimidation of like, but it's got to be a harmonious two-way street, I think, for it to be effective.
Yes. And you said it before, that you always felt safe and that you feel like it's harmonious. You feel like there's a mutual respect. That's how the relationship should be. And you, whether you lucked out or you're really good during the interview process, who knows? I want to get to that in a second, but you were fortunate to have the same advisor and advisor team for this many years. If some people are not feeling this, if some people are listening and saying, oh, geez, I don't feel safe. I feel like I'm hiding information. I feel like I'm hiding details. I feel a little nervous if I need to talk to my advisor. What do you think they should do?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, obviously I'm in this business, right? And I was surrounded by advisors all day, every day. So much easier for me to just naturally, organically find someone who is a good fit, for sure. But if I move into maybe other parts of my life, whatever it might be, you could think of a, trainer at the gym, or a therapist, or anyone else, right?
Service provider.
Sometimes you have to meet, you got to meet multiple people to find the right fit.
Yes.
And so I think for anyone who's either gone down the path and it didn't work out, or is embarking on it, I think some of those things, like with anything else, is, okay, what's important to me?
Yes.
The more you can know that going in, what's my style? What am I good at? What am I not good at? What are my values? And is this person aligned to my values?
Yes.
And I think it's, it's not fair. I think it's very important to go into that engagement proactively assessing if this person is a fit.
Yes.
And if they're not, then find someone else. There's a lot of advisors out there, and they're not all going to be a fit for each person, right?
Yes.
It's about finding, if you're going to have that longevity and that trust and be able to be vulnerable, you got to find someone that you connect with. And if not, it's fine to move to someone else.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, exactly. And you just said it, that maybe going into the relationship kind of like interview style or dating style, right? Maybe a little skeptical and knowing what your priorities are.
Yeah. And I think too, I don't know about you, but a lot of times as I'm thinking about this, I find many of those people in my life through referrals from people that I know and trust and that know me. Right. So that's always a good way too.
That's great.
And I think sometimes, I don't know, maybe it's financial is a little bit taboo because people don't like talking about it as much as maybe, where they get their hair done or something else. Right. But I think that's a path to really explore, of putting that out there to people that care about you and vice versa. Because chances are one of them has someone that's at least worth talking to, right? And can make an introduction, and it's not, this kind of cold, just, kiss as many frogs, so to speak.
Yes, but I love it. Go in interview style and realize that you as the client, it's more important that you are comfortable and that you can be vulnerable and be truthful with this person.
Exactly.
And if you don't have that relationship with your current advisor, it's time to move on.
Exactly.
Yep. And they'll understand that. But you were very fortunate. So 17 years with the same advisor team is phenomenal. Tell us what you looked for or what kind of stuck out to you.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think it was at the time, it was, finding kind of more of the natural style fit, feeling like I could be open and transparent and have open dialogue. I think there's also, clearly there's an aspect of any profession, but certainly this one where competence is crucial. Right. So I think inspecting for competence. And so that was something I was clear on and was demonstrated to me that this person was competent. They were also surrounded by other competent people, right? They, as you've referenced a few times, they worked in a team. They had some additional kind of experts they worked with or partnered with, right? So that was important to me as well.
Can you talk more about that? What do you define as competent? What did you look for as competent?
Well, I mean, I think number one, foundationally in this business, right, there's certain designations that advisors have to work hard to obtain as well as maintain. Just have a standard of expertise that's required. So I think that goes a very long way. I think the other thing too is just looking at who they're affiliated with. We've got advisors that'll have strategic partnerships with certain other professionals. I think that's a kind of demonstration of their commitment to their clients. And, chances are if they're working with other, successful and expert professionals, right, they're going to be held to that standard as well. So I think those were some of the things. And again, obviously back to the referrals, right? If you can kind of get a gauge of that. But to me, those are the things to look for. There are, for clients out there too, there's also ways to actually look and make sure the advisors has kind of a clean track record, if you will, in terms of customer complaints, things like that. So there are resources if you go in and do your research on a prospective advisor that you can pull up those things.
That's great. What about, I know you started working with an advisor, not too young. We had a guest on who started in her 20s, but you did start when you were on the younger side, just starting adulting, as you had mentioned, debunking that myth that you need to have huge sums of money to be working with a financial advisor. As someone, again, who's worked on both sides, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's so far from the truth. And I think about just, again, that combination of having ongoing conversations. And as we've referenced here, as life events happen, having someone who's going to think about things that don't even cross your mind. And it's not about, people look at this profession, it's like, oh, managing money, right? And there's so much more to this, as you know. And I think of one example when we were having children, and my wife and I actually had worked together at one point, but when we were having children, she was staying home. And so we're having children and we're, talking to our advisor about that. And think about, okay, well, life insurance becomes more important when you're going to have children, right? But at the time, my wife didn't have income, so it didn't even cross my mind. But I remember vividly my advisor saying, God forbid your wife pass away and you have two young boys. What are you going to want to do? I'm like, man, I'm certainly not going to want to be sweating about paying bills.
Yes, you're not going to have to.
Right. And it's like, okay, life insurance on my wife, that's a no brainer. I never in a million years being in this business at the time for whatever, 15 years, would have never thought about that. Right. So I just think of those life events that occur and having someone who's got that outside perspective. And that's a financial one. As you know, I relocated for work a couple of times. Right. And so having, this person as a sounding board, changing jobs, coming here, right? I mean, it's, a lot of times it's just, again, that familiarity with who we are, our values, our goals. And then when these important life events or decisions come up, having that person who can kind of be a counselor in those moments, right? And certainly, wearing the financial hat, but it certainly has gone much broader than that for me.
So using your financial advisor, again, for more than just the annual plan or meeting every other year or so to review your plan, seems like you called him when you had to make a life decision of some sort.
Yeah, for sure. It was, certainly one of the earlier calls I made, and just like, okay, I got this opportunity, need to talk it through. And again, brought just way broader than perspective than, how my portfolio may look or, what my 401k choices might be. Right. Yes. It was a totally, and by the way, I mean, I think we had conversations and helped me think through and get alignment to those important things and decisions and considerations. And then the other things were afterthoughts, right? It's like, okay, we'll take care of that. That became more, administrative steps of, kind of my money, my benefits, right? Mm-hmm. Those things were things that we could easily take care of, frankly, through email or something else, right? I wasn't in this, am I getting, is something being sold and bought or whatever? It was make the right decision. And then, the other things are pretty clear what to do next.
Well, I think that's because in the beginning you mentioned, because of how often you spoke, that he pushed a little, but that you were always leading. So it seems like as a consumer, you always had a sense of control, which I think is what every consumer wants. Nobody wants to feel pushed or sold.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think even, I say this all the time to advisors and frankly, everyone in our industry. I think we're, as I said earlier, kind of on this journey of thinking of this moving from selling things to consulting and education, right? I think as a consumer, at least for me, way different than, dating myself here, right? Pre-internet days and other things where like, take me on a journey to collaborate on a good decision, right? Don't kind of force something on me. And so I think that's, to me, any good experience is where it's co-created, collaborative, informative, and then you're doing it with confidence, which is huge.
Well, and you just said all the right words: co-creation, collaboration. You did your part as a client. And I think, we always talk about the relationship between an advisor and a client has responsibilities there as well. So you seem like the model client because you are keeping your advisor up to date with these big decisions versus a client that may not make that call to say, hey, I relocated, I started a new job, all these changes happened. Maybe they only make that call every couple of years or when the advisor could finally get in touch with you. And then after a few years goes by, maybe there are things you have to do, or the advisor is strongly recommending things. And now maybe you do feel a little bit sold or a little bit pushed. But that's maybe because there was such a gap in time.
Yeah. And I do think it comes back to probably an easy question is your advisor aware of your goals? Mm-hmm. And if the answer to that's no, then either it's the wrong advisor, you as a client haven't opened yourself up enough, haven't created the time, haven't initiated, right? Whatever it may be,
Yep.
different circumstances.
Or they change. Like
Yeah.
you said, a collaboration and co-creation.
Right.
A goal that you have today can be so different than a goal
So
you
true.
have in 6 months or in a year or when the kids get older. That's just human nature and that's fair. But not picking up the phone to tell your advisor, hey, this is now important to me. What adjustments do we have to make?
Yeah, I think that's the key thing is, again, it should be, it should be two-way communication, proactive on both parties, right? And again, having that expectation that there's joint accountability and everyone's rowing in the same direction to help, the client achieve what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, you should always get the feeling that your advisor is on your side, just like your doctor, just like any service provider. You should get a really good feeling when you pick up that phone to call that person. If you don't, that's a sign that it's probably time for a change.
Yeah, and one thing I think about too, I mentioned as you have, this advisor being part of a team. Many advisors are, some aren't, but I think it's also a lot of advisors will have these strategic partnerships. So sometimes the client may not bring things to them because they don't see them through the light in terms of what their expertise is, right? Maybe they've only worked with them on, or their entree was, they had a 401k to roll over, or their entree was they had a child and they had to buy insurance, right? And so I think that's also how some of these become more siloed in terms of how they view their advisor, because it's how they got introduced.
That's true.
Right. So I think really understanding, what are their breadth of services? And ideally, my recommendation is at least have someone. They don't have to be the expert in everything, right? They don't even have to do it under their own umbrella, but find the person that you're going to trust and open up to, and then allow them to be a resource to you to introduce you to the right experts as these life events happen, right? But having someone who's aware of your goals, who you have this open dialogue with, who you allow to push you, right? And vice versa, and then let them be a resource broker as, your needs. Don't assume they can't help you because they're not in that space.
Because they don't know. Yep. Educate yourself on what it is that they can do. Dan, what else do our listeners need to know before we close up? If you could give our listeners one piece of advice that helped you along your journey with working with an advisor, what would it be?
Yeah, I think I would, number one, I would encourage everyone, right? I mean, this is my parents are getting older, they're in kind of this long-term care phase. And I'm just looking at the idea of having some assets through a different lens of what it could do for families and, whatever stage you're in, right? It's just, you're living your moment. We're all busy. We don't think about how, resources, money, those things can help you and help your family and help your loved ones down the road, whether it's someone gets disabled or, death, and can children stay in. I mean, these are major things, right? Yeah. And so I think just putting that, no matter, to your point, where you are in your life, there's nothing that isn't better served if you plan ahead for it than if you deal with it when it happens, right? Period. And so I think just even for that reason, start as soon as you can. Go find someone that you can go on this journey like I described with, because over time, the more trust you build, that person's going to build more competence, right? You do that together so that when these meaningful moments happen, you're as prepared as possible. And again, with financial services, especially regardless of the discipline, the more time you have, time is your friend in this, right? So the more you can get into planning mode, and back to what we shared earlier, it's fine. Wherever you are is okay. Do not drop all judgment, right? The fact that you step forward and say, hey, I'm going to work on my finances and I want to plan for the future. You're like in the top quartile, if not top 1% of people, right?
Yes.
So encourage everyone, go put yourself out there, put in the effort to go find someone that's an expert, that cares about you, that will help you reach your goals. And there's no question that you will be in a better position for doing so.
Oh, that's great. And you're 100% correct. Dan, it's been such a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and your stories with us.
This was a blast. Thank you so much for doing this.
Of course. Thank you for listening to Master Your Money. Please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Every little bit helps. You can also follow us on our Instagram at Barnum Financial Group.
All opinions expressed by the program participants are solely their current opinions and do not reflect the opinions their respective parent companies or affiliates or the companies with which the program participants are affiliated. Investments or strategies mentioned in this program may not be suitable for you, and you should make your own independent decision regarding them. This material does not take into account your particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs, and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for you. You should strongly consider seeking advice from your own investment advisor. Securities and investment advisory services offered through qualified registered representatives of MML Investor Services, LLC. Member SIPC, 6 Corporate Drive, Shelton, Connecticut, 06484, telephone number 203-513-6000.